I'm getting a message from Amy. Say your intro again, did not start until now. Okay, hi, I'm Jill Hoffmans, the Executive Director of the Conway Center for Family Business. I hope you all have your coffee and are ready to join us for our ED program. This is our new normal until at least the middle of May as ODU is shut down for programming. I am happy today to introduce Bea Wolper. She is the president of Emmons, Wolper, Jacobs, and Jason Law Firm, also a co-founder of the Conway Center, and she will be running our panel today on rites of passage, assessing the next generation of leadership. So I'm going to kick it over to Bea. I'm going to be quiet. You can use your Q&A button to ask questions. I will be fielding those to Bea, who will then manage those with the panel. If I feel like they're urgent enough to interrupt, I will. Otherwise, we'll hold them until the end. But feel free to use your Q&A, not your chat button. All right, Bea, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry that we have to meet this way, but I think it's better than not meeting at all. And I hope you all are safe and hunkering down and washing your hands, and we'll get through all this. And we were just talking about getting through all this, and I'd like to just start by introducing my panel, having them tell you a little bit about their businesses, what they do, how many family members are in the business, and do they have any that are outside the business. So Lori, why don't you start?
Good morning to everyone. And again, hopefully everyone is sheltering safely and with their loved ones. I represent MAC Construction. It's a family-owned business. We've been in business well over 34 years. We have 6 children, of which our 2 sons are participants in the business. Our 4 daughters have their own business interests. So we are together as a family, knowing about business, but only the 2 sons are actually in the business with us. We have a very small company, and as you will see with the other panelists, we are at one end of the spectrum and he is at the other. So we have a total of 15 employees. We do commercial construction. We do have a number of projects, but at this point, we have opted to temporarily close our operations for at least 2 weeks. And we are fortunate in that the status of the projects was such that we could do this. And we felt it was in the best interest of all our staff and our team and their families. So hopefully, as with all of you, we will get through this together. Thank you, Bea.
Hey, Brian, your turn.
I'm Brian Dew with Mid-City Electric. I'm 2nd generation. My dad and his partner started the business in 1960. So this year we're turning 60 on June 1st. Myself and 2 of my brothers and my sister were in the business, and we've done a transition and have worked through a lot of issues. We now currently, myself and my 2 sons are in the business, and 2 of 4 sons, 2 in the business, 2 not in the business. My 2 oldest, Jimmy and Ryan, are in the business and hold positions of HR. Ryan's in HR, but he's making a transition over to the finance side, and Jimmy is running our service and small projects division, and both doing very well and both very engaged in the business. I feel very fortunate for that, and our 2 other sons are doing other things. Lots of challenges going on right now for the business. We are considered an essential business, and so it is business as usual. At least that's what we're trying to accomplish. At the start of this, we were a little over 500 employees, and now we're probably down to roughly 450, and that's sort of changing every day. And we've had to focus very, very hard on communication throughout all of this, so that everyone, we minimize the confusion. But that's where we are today.
Well, thank you.
Mhm.
Well, I think it's clear that when we're talking about succession, that the journey for a successful transition of the business has to also start with planning for the leadership. And so not only has the founder has to choose the successor wisely, but you have to train the successor. Well, you also have to do that while confronting possible conflicts. And you think of it as a journey. It's not a one-time event. If the family business is going to succeed, you can't just turn over the keys and walk away. So it requires planning, conversation, just what you said, teamwork, constant reevaluation. And so we're really lucky to have the two of you here today. And hopefully we're going to give others some tips of what you had been starting to think about as you started your journey, contemplating it. Hope you're past contemplating. You have to have those strong relationships. So when you're selecting a successor, luckily, our panelists are not faced with the problem that some people are, that the successors are underprepared, disinterested, lazy. Sorry, that's what happens. You guys are not facing that problem. You have people who are not only interested, but working and want it and excited. And so we're going to be discussing the active, qualified, interested successor elects. It's a different issue. We're not asking the panelists who the next leaders are. We're only discussing the factors that lead up to the discussion in their thinking. So when you're thinking about the factors that go into a successful family business leader, we've always talked about, and we're going to come back and hit each one of these with you guys: commitment, decisiveness, vision, respect, ability to communicate, and also, of course, a willingness to learn. So how do you evaluate each factor when you're talking about it? So let's talk about commitment. Brian, talk about commitment a little bit. Is that something that you look for, and how do you judge commitment?
Well, I think it's essential. It varies from, every little things like day-to-day things that you witness. That are they here? Are they working hard? Are they earning the respect of others? Or are they taking off a lot? Are they, what hours do they keep? Are they keeping, earning, like I said, earning the respect of others in what they do? Because let's face it, the son or daughter of the boss has all eyes on them at all times. I know it because I lived it, and people are just looking at you, wanting to see you fail, and really testing you more so than they test others. So it's just a constant thing that you observe, and you coach as much as you can, but they actually have to have the kind of qualities of a leader in them, and the enthusiasm and the energy and the work ethic first. If they don't have that, you can't. It's hard to teach.
I agree. Lori, do you want to add anything to that, or?
I think also what's important, and the way that we approached it initially with our two sons, was to try and individually clarify with them whether this was indeed their vision for where they wanted to be in their lives. Were they committed, as Brian said, to the business as a integral part of who they are and where they're going? Or were there other things that perhaps they had to consider before they could make that all in commitment? And I think we wanted them to feel comfortable in the roles that they were going to assume, if indeed this is what they wanted. And I think you have to allow that for anyone, particularly any of your children. They need to know that you have the ability to determine where you want to go with your life. And it should not feel compelling to have to do this because it's some kind of a responsibility to the family or to the business. You need to be committed because that's where your goals and your visions are. So I think once we clarified that with our boys, we were able to move ahead and to really help to develop them and give them the skills and the experience and the expertise. And as Brian said, the respect. That was key, the respect from those in our company that they were going to lead, to be able to build a team around them that really could, they could gather their strength and move forward in whatever direction they felt was in the best interest of the company.
So Donna has a question about both of Brian and Lori, and I know Bea has thoughts on this. What about having family members go outside the business to get experience before coming in? Did you have a philosophy around that, or was that an issue for either of you?
I think it's beneficial myself. Both Jimmy and Ryan have two different perspectives. Jimmy spent his entire apprenticeship with another electrical contractor. That was kind of an unwritten rule with how the union and the apprenticeship handled things, and I didn't disagree. So I thought it would be a good idea for him to experience, how another contractor operates. So I think that was, I view that as a positive. And in Ryan's case, when he graduated from Ohio State, we put him out in the field to gain experience in the safety area, because that was his kind of area of focus. And so while he was out in the field, he also got field experience. Now, that's not working for someone else, but that's just kind of how it worked for us.
And I'll jump in and just say that our sons were diverse in the directions that they came to the company. Our one older son did graduate with a degree in organizational management, which dovetails very well with what he does within the company. However, he chose to say, I'm not ready. And this was right after graduation. I'm not ready to do this. I want to go and travel. So he did. He traveled and did all the things that he felt he wanted to do at that point in time. And ultimately, after several years, did come back. He worked a number of different jobs, wait staff, bartender, he just went out and did these various things that were not necessarily related to what the company is. But, and then our second son did the school of hard knocks. I don't know how else to explain that, except that he chose a route that was very different. I am proud to say that he is clean and sober at this point and has been for 12 years. And I think that really was a test of his ability and his character. And I think he learned a tremendous amount. And I will put a pitch in for a business class that he did attend through the Goldman Sachs Small Business Institute. And it was here in Columbus. It was a pilot program, and they took 20 small businesses, individuals from small businesses, and they walked them through an intensive 10-week course of everything that has to do with, developing your own business, running your own business. All aspects of it were touched upon. And he came back the enthusiasm and the excitement that he came back with was unbelievable. So I would highly recommend, if anyone has an opportunity, I believe they're starting another class in the fall, go online and see whether or not that would suit your particular business. But I will tell you, it made a huge difference. So again, they came from different places, but they came together. And I'm sure Brian will vouch for this, that sometimes with children, they can get along really well in some areas, but in others, maybe not. But we were fortunate in the boys have their strengths in different areas, so they complement each other extremely well. So again, I think that's something that we're very fortunate to have.
And I think that most of the time people like their children to go out and get experience someplace else and then come back. Sometimes it doesn't work that way, but it is always beneficial to have experience so that when you come back, you sort of have a leg up. You aren't just the child of the boss. You know, there's that joke about the 16-year-old who has a birthday party at daddy's office, and daddy says, "Oh, and I want all of you to meet your new boss," you know, at 16. You know, it doesn't go over really well. So you talked about vision, Lori, and that's, and obviously both of you also were talking about respect. How's the ability to communicate? Are they both good in communicating what they want to your employees and what they want to you, and how they feel with their other siblings? How is their ability to communicate? Do you consider that something that's necessary? Either one want to start, or else I'll pick on you.
I guess I'll start. I think communication is really important in all aspects of business and personal relationships. and they both have different styles and different strengths in communicating. And it's really a work in progress. And, you know, whether it's, you know, one-on-one communication with others, or if it's communicating, like trying to sell a job, it's filling out, it's filling out their weaknesses and working on it. And, you know, you just have to work on it in every single aspect, including having difficult conversations and learning how to have those difficult conversations with one another, or, you know, with others. And it's a constant coaching process.
Yeah, it's absolutely one of the key points that you have to really coach and teach. Lori?
Exactly. I think that, as Brian said, each of our sons has different approaches to the communication between themselves, between our employees, and between our subcontractors, owners, etc. And I find that they each understand their ability to communicate and in which way they feel most comfortable. So I think, again, to assist them in this, you know, with my husband and I, who are obviously, you know, hopefully more experienced in doing this, they have learned how to reach out and to really address any kind of a communication between others and themselves. And I know that one will agree readily that, well, I really like doing all the background things. I like being able to do the analytical part and the organizational, operational part. And our other son really likes to be a people person, I guess is the best way you could describe that. So he really shines in that area. So I think, again, they complement each other with the ways in which they communicate. And as you said, respect, as we've mentioned before, that's the key. You cannot be entitled to assume those positions of leadership because you are the children of the owners. I think that is, you know, probably the most difficult thing as a parent, to understand that your child has to earn that respect for whoever it is that you have on your team. They need to be, you know, viewed as competent and capable, and to know that they have the trust of the individuals that are working with you as a team. So yes, communication is key.
Thank you. I think that leads really well into, I think, one of the big issues that many people face when they have more than one child and they're trying to decide who would be the next leader. And then they often will say, well, why do I have to pick one? Why can't I figure out some way to have more than one? And so the question is, have you thought about dividing management among talents, among skill sets, functional lines, business units? And then do you still think that at the top of the chart, there needs to be a decision maker? These are hard conversations and really difficult issues trying to decide. Lori, as you said, one's analytical, one's a people person. Do you divide it that way, or do you say, yeah, but at the top, we're going to have somebody make a decision? What factors go into that thinking process? Lori, why don't you start?
All right. I think that it is a work in process for us here at MAC. We initially, and I'll share this with people, initially made the presumption that our oldest son would be the one to ascend to that principal position. Not realizing, of course, or not taking into consideration the abilities of his younger brother, knowing that they work together well, but just presuming that the oldest would then be the natural leader. But as we're moving through this process, I believe we are making adjustments, and we're trying to evaluate the strengths and then their abilities and where their comfort is. And I think that's the other thing that needs to be surveyed, is you need to understand what they view as their strengths and what they see as the important elements for them to be able to provide the best guidance within the company, the best leadership in the company. So we're still working on that, B. But I agree. I think ultimately there needs to be a decision maker at the top. But again, I think this is in conversation with, in our case, with both sons. I think we need to come up with a solution and a resolution that will allow both of them to have strong input into whatever decisions the company moves forward with.
Yes, I'm familiar with a company where there are two strong leaders, and the dad had left it to them 50-50, and for years and years and years, one was the face of the company. He happened to play a guitar. And the other one was, and everybody knows the story because they've talked about it.
Subtle, yeah, subtle B.
I'm so subtle. And the other one really was doing the business decisions. But between them, the two of them had worked it out. And even though revenue was always 50-50, that they worked it out between them as to who was the ultimate decision maker, although they talked about the decisions all the time, and they always worked it out. Brian.
That's a pretty broad question, but and like Lori, my two sons are very different in their personalities and their approach, and they are both are very complementary to one another, their skill sets, and so my decision hasn't been made yet, and
Right.
It's an ongoing process, and I believe what my dad decided for our company to assign me to be president, I think was, a good move. It's very, very difficult to put pressure on two people to always agree on what the decisions are going to be.
Right.
It has to be one person, and it really your buy-sell agreement has to support that, and the buy-sell agreement also it is important because there needs to be a solution to if things don't work. There's got to be a vehicle to support what's best for the business, because really, when even though these are family businesses, the business does need to come first, because the ongoing and long-term health of the business needs to be at the forefront of decision making. And placing that in one person's hands, I think, is important and necessary. just to avoid the kind of potential conflicts that occur if that's not done.
Right. And I totally agree. I mean, everybody has heard me on my bandstand about you have to have a proper buy sell. I mean, if you're in business with anybody besides yourself, you need a proper buy sell. Switching a little bit as to the training that comes in with how you train for the next leader. What does it take to run the company? The finances, the interaction with customers, the suppliers, the employers. Is there formal training, or how do you go about getting it so that your successor-elect, whoever it is, has enough knowledge on how to run the company if you weren't there? So
Difficult question. Yeah, difficult question, B, and I'll take as far as training and experience, I think my husband has done an outstanding job in trying to walk the boys through the various aspects of the business. We have certainly developed a team with our financial, our accountants, and our project managers. I mean, we've really worked to get the boys well on their way to understanding, and they have, because they've worked in the business, each of them 10, 15 years, so they are aware of the processes and procedures, but I see them wanting to gain more, so we've obviously sent them to a variety of different instructional, as I mentioned with Stephen, that he was sent to this Goldman Sachs, which was incredibly enlightening for him. So again, there are lots of opportunities, and we really encourage them to reach out to other individuals that they feel can lend them the kind of support and training. But we had no formalized, we have no formalized training for leadership other than to discuss these things in context with our key management people, so that they know that anything that they can bring to the table, anything that we can provide for them, that's a way to provide, I believe, firm and foundational training for everybody that's on your management team.
Ryan, how about you, especially when it comes to finances and interaction with customers and bankers and vendors?
Mm-hmm.
Well, as far as finances go, Ryan's getting a baptism of fire right now.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. But in terms of, I guess, it's a process of trying to learn the business and all aspects of it. I try to do several things. Number one, they've both been through a series of Builders Exchange leadership courses, and so they get interaction with other leaders in the construction business, and develop relationships that way. And then another thing that I do is there are two national events for our National Electrical Contractors Association. I take one in the spring and one in the fall, and there's a lot of education that takes place there, and a lot of interaction with other electrical contractors. And then third, and probably the most important, is I have a peer group of other electrical contractors across the country, 11 other contractors, and we meet twice a year. So I take Jimmy in the spring and Ryan in the fall, and that's probably the best way to teach them how to work through issues with other electrical contractors and develop relationships with those people that they can call and ask questions with, and work through issues, and that works extremely well. And I found it beneficial not only for myself, but also now with the boys.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and say I would encourage everybody to have their successor elect join the rising leaders at the Conway, or you know, the next gen at the Conway, and you know, to start figuring out the different aspects that it takes to become the next leader. And then I know that many times companies are reluctant to share finances and those thoughts during these times. With having to reassess everything we're doing, would be a really good time, as Brian said, to bring your successor elect, your next gen, along to have them go through the terrible and awful decisions of what do we do now during this time? How do we furl? How do we let people go? Who's going to take care of them? Where can we go for help? What does it mean to the company? When do we think we're going to reopen? All of those questions that we get, you know, every day would be a good, teaching lesson during this time for the next gen, as terrible as it is.
And I have to agree,
One other
B.
thing, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Brian.
Well, one other thing I thought of is that we do that I think is very helpful is they're both part of our leadership team, so that, you know, big things affecting the business, like what's going on right now, they're involved in every meeting, every discussion, and they have input into the decisions, and they can witness my decision-making process, good or bad, but they're right there, and there's no translation that needs to occur.
I agree with Brian and with B. I think it's important to involve the next gens in the decision-making process. And as I mentioned earlier, B, that's what I'm really has crystallized, is during this time of emergency and this times of crisis, I have seen the two boys just rise to the challenge. I have been very proud to see the types of steps and analysis that they have done with the company and with all of our teammate members, so that they are providing what they feel is the important priorities, not only to sustaining the business, but to sustaining all of the individuals that we have in the company. So again, sadly, it is a crisis sometimes that brings that to the fore, because they've never had to deal with it. We've actually never had to deal with this as the older generation. So it is a very trying time, but it's also a very challenging time. And I think it can bring the best out of your leadership when you have to deal with these hard decisions.
And I think what you said is critically important, is that many times the next gen you don't get to see how they react in a crisis. So perhaps this is a good time to take advantage of this terrible time and use it to really analyze the successor elect, the next gen that are coming up, you know, see what competencies they have with dealing with people. Do they foster teamwork, or do they not foster teamwork? I mean, how do they go about empowering others, and how do they then get the respect of the team because of how they're acting? And so it's a terrible time, but managing change is one of the qualifications for a good leader. How do you manage change? And so what a great teaching lesson, unfortunately. How do they do their attention to communication, especially now when you, unless you're essential, you really are not going to have face-to-face. You're going to have this, you're going to have remote. How are they doing the attention to the communication that they need to do with the people who report to them? Lori?
At this point that we are remote, and we are doing just as you have said. We are doing the boys have set everybody up on the Zoom conferencing so that they can interact with them visually, because sometimes it is important to be able to do a face-to-face, even if it's not in the same room. And they've sent out memos and communications within our staff so that they are updated as to what challenges are the company facing in these times, what are our plans. We wanted to reassure, of course, all of our team members that they are important to us. First and foremost, their well-being. And I think that goes across the board for many, many companies. You want to reassure those people that they're in there, that we're there for them, hopefully on the long haul. Who knows how long this is going to last, but you want to reassure them that you are working diligently on their best interest in terms of keeping them on, keeping them financially secure, keeping them, connected to the company, so that when we are through this, that we're able to get up and running immediately, if not more so.
Brian?
That's one thing that I've been very, very pleased with is both my boys have been very engaged with everyone that reports to them, as well as each other, and it's really been, I guess, one of those silver linings in this time. They have just been answering their phones, calling their people, just really keeping on top of the message and top of the communication, and pretty good listening skills too, which is a good leadership quality.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, when I first started preparing for this, the two topics that I thought we could spend a lot of time on was the competencies on how they deal with people and the competencies on how they deal with the business. And as it turns out, because of the crisis, it becomes even more important. We talked about the competencies on how they're dealing with the people right now. So then the competency as far as dealing with the business, are they part of your information gathering, your analytical thinking about how to go forward and financially and with bankers and vendors and customers? What part of that competency in dealing with the business end do you see important for the next leaders? Brian, I'll start with you this time.
Well, I think that Ryan's new to the position of finance, and he is like taking a drink from the fire hose. I'm trying to take the lead in helping the situation for him, having discussions with our bankers, making sure the bonding company knows what's going on. Talking with our vendors and about what's happening and terms and so forth. So as far as Jimmy is concerned, the discussions he's having with the people who report to him, what's important, which is why he's part of our COVID-19 leadership committee. So that when we meet we're meeting at 9 o'clock, so hopefully this gets done by 9.
It will.
But we meet every day and all, more than once a day if it's needed. But that's I feel it's been something that's been positive that's come out of this.
Lori?
Exactly. I think that being a smaller company, we don't have the numbers that Brian certainly has to deal with and his sons have to deal with. But again, that immediate communication, that ongoing communication is so critical. And we have, one of our sons is very much involved in kind of the face of the company, as you mentioned before. Our other son is much more involved in, the operational and how things are working, how we need to work through. And it's interesting because prior to this emergency setting in, we were going through a full analysis, of our organizational workflow and the positions, and we were redefining the job descriptions and responsibilities, and just to see where we're at moving forward. We were trying to prepare ourselves for this transition to the new leadership. And in doing so, I think it just, fortunately or unfortunately, this crisis came up, and that's kind of brought this even more so to the forefront, where we need to pay attention to the various aspects that you listed out in terms of what their focus needs to be moving forward for the family business. And communication, again, is so critical, and just letting all of Mac Construction know that we are there for them and for our vendors and our owners, etc. And hopefully we will get through this together.
And we will. So the third leg of the stool, this, competencies dealing with people, competencies dealing with the business. The third leg has to do with self-management. How do people react? And so again, now we're in a crisis. You can really see some characteristics. Do they have self-confidence? How do they deal with stress? Do they have personal credibility to others? Are they flexible? This whole self-management, because a leader needs to have self-management. Does this time of stress, is it helpful to both of you to see how they manage themselves? From a 10,000-foot view, if you weren't around, are they screamers? Do they handle it by going and not wanting to talk to anybody? Are they communicating? Do they blame people? I mean, self-management is there as an issue going forward. Laura, you want to kick off that one? That's a tough one.
That is, we do have the opportunity to be able to see how they react to this ongoing crisis. And again, this also, I think, for them, for each of the boys, it gives them the opportunity, or it forces them to address where they are, how are they responding to this? What are their tendencies to withdraw into the shell or to open up? So again, we are beginning to see how they're responding to it, and we're pleased with it. But again, it's an ongoing thing each and every day, how they respond to what's being thrown at us, both as a company and personally. And, for us to see this is a gift in a way, even though it's under circumstances that we wouldn't want to have arise. But that said, yes, you're right. They need to know where their strengths are and where they're moving forward. And at this point, yes, I think that they're handling it well. It's hilarious to see my one son, who has 4 young children. So he has set aside a remote office for himself. And you can see when we're doing the video conferencing, they're all peeking around the doors and, wanting to come in and, be part of the whole conversation. And that's a man, but he's handling that very well, even though he tells us, oh, I think I'm going to crawl up the wall and out the door and all this. But I think that's all part of, how we have to handle this. Both the balance between the family and the business is also critical.
Right. Brian?
Well, I don't have a whole lot to add. I agree with everything that Lori just said. But certainly it's telling, and we all pay attention to how people react. And, a good leader has to lead through good times and bad times. So, that's really, and especially in bad times, is when the microscope is on the leader. So I think everyone pays attention to that, and how people react to that will tell what level of respect everyone has for that individual. So everyone pays attention.
Everyone pays attention, especially the child of the current leader.
Yes.
Yeah. What are they doing? And let me put them under the microscope.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So switching gears just a little bit, because we have a little bit of time. The other issue that always comes up, which is difficult because you knew I was going to ask you difficult questions. How do you balance, and what do you communicate to your other children who are not going to take over the family business? Do you let them know, or is it, as one of my people had told me, I'm going to just let you tell them after I'm dead who I decided, which is really not a good way, by the way. How do you handle the other children? Anybody want to start? Pick, pick, pick.
Well,
Okay,
I
Lori.
think you were you kind of were the one to make us sit down and think about that. My husband and I think about how were we going to address this with our other 4 children. They knew obviously that their brothers were very instrumental in the company, but we also wanted it to be something that they understood just from experiences that we've had, that it's that transparency needs to be there for the family as well as for those that are in the business. So we did have an all family meeting and laid out the buy sell and laid out the intentions of my husband and I as far as the leadership within the company and how it was going to move forward. And all of them concurred, thankfully, even one that had to be remotely brought in from overseas, they all concurred that this was indeed, the best possible plan. They understood. And again, we have other children that are involved in other businesses, and they certainly understand the importance of letting everyone know what your plans are, what your thoughts are, and where the leadership for the company is going from here.
Yeah, transparency. Ryan?
Well, I probably ought to take some notes from that. You're touching on the subject of fairness. I think every parent always wants to be fair with all of their children.
Right.
One thing that I've kind of grown up in is if you're not in the business, you're not part of the business and you're not sharing in the value of the business. At the same time, we want to be fair to our children. So therefore, we, and I haven't had this discussion with the rest of the family, but I think it's important to manage that in a way that after all is said and done, everyone is treated fairly. And that may be in other value that your estate has that gets divided up differently than the business gets divided up. But a rule that I grew up, like I said before, that I grew up with is if you're not in the business, then you don't own any of the business. In other words, you got to be working in the business to have ownership. And I believe that that's appropriate. And because if you have family members that are not in the business, then they start having a voice in something that they really don't fully understand. And it creates stress on the family that is in the business. So I've never had to deal with that, and I'm thankful that I never have. And my dad just, never told us what he was exactly doing, but he was always being fair to the other siblings in a different way. and that's kind of how I intend to do it. Fairness within the business, I believe, and this might be touching on something that you haven't brought up yet, but compensation. I believe it's always been my belief that you should be rewarded as your salary should reward you for what you're doing and their contribution to the business. That's separate from ownership.
Thank you.
So and if you don't do that, you really set yourself up for problems and resentment.
Yes. And you jumped because that was going to be my next. So I thank
Sorry.
you. No, I mean, I think that one of the problems that we see sometimes with oh, I love my children equally, kiss, kiss. And so they make the mistake of giving them stock equally, or say they have to have equal compensation rather than based on performance. And there is a reason why a minor percent of family businesses succeed to the fourth generation. And it has nothing to do with taxes or anything else. It has to do with family dynamics. And compensation is one of the big issues always that raises its ugly head if it is based on anything other than performance. It has to be based on performance. Okay, those are my 2 cents. Laura, you want to add anything?
No, I have to agree. I think that the business needs to stand alone in some regards, as far as you do want to be fair to all the children that are part of the family, but not the family business. And I have to agree. I think that there are other ways in which to make this an equitable share when it comes to the estate planning, etc. That take into consideration that you have children that are in the business and those that have other interests. So we've tried to structure it with your help and guidance to allow for that to be part of the determination of how that that sharing of the whatever monies or properties or anything else that are within the governed by the trust and the estate will be handled in an equitable manner. So, but it's difficult, because you do want to make sure that everybody is clear on that. And you understand, and we had a family situation where that was not made clear all the way, and it causes deep underwriting resentments within a family and can literally tear a family apart. So I think my one huge, advice to people is to please make your intents and your purposes, transparent to the next gen, to those in your family, so that they know it was not made just on a whim. Oh, I like this child better than that child, or whatever it is. You don't want those kind of thoughts to linger on after you're gone, or where nobody can question, well, what were mom and dad really thinking? I think you need to try and make this as apparent to your next generation of leaders and your family, certainly most importantly to the family. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, we often say that fair is not always equal, and equal is not always fair. And so you take it from there. It's often one of the things that people do when they're considering dividing up the assets that they have is they give the business what Kelly Jason and I call the business the headache discount. And a headache discount is exactly that. If you have $500,000 in a business value and $500,000 in cash, they are not equal, because with the business comes a headache. You have to make payroll. You have to figure out how to keep the business going. And so we often give it a discount that we call the headache discount when you're dividing up the assets, because fair isn't always equal, and equal is not always fair. So,
Can I just jump in here real quick? We're coming upon our 5-minute warning. And if anybody has questions they want to ask, you need to hover your mouse down at the bottom of the screen and you'll see a Q&A button. You can click that and ask a question, and then I can ask B to cover that with the panel. But if we don't get any questions, you have about 5 minutes, B.
all right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
We could go back to the initial factors. And when we talked about the commitment to the business, because it is a family business, how important is it to you guys that the next leader also has to have a commitment to the family, that you need to think about your your siblings, if you're going to be becoming the leader of this business, how important is the commitment to both the family and the business? Brian, you want to start with that?
That certainly gets, you know, the mind working. And it seems to me that maybe there's a written in the buy-sell agreement is some kind of code that of expectation and behavior of the leader of the business, and something that they could, you know, always refer back to and use that as a source of communication. I think that where things can go wrong down the road are if communication breaks down or doesn't happen. I think that there ought to be some form of a rule also that they meet once a month or a quarter and go over certain topics that are business related, so that there's nothing lost in translation, and the leaders have a chance to work through issues and also somehow be able to voice concerns, even though it's very, very uncomfortable. And how there's lots of experts out there that can help with that. B being one of them. You know, we had a session where B took each individual owner into a separate room and chatted with them just to hear what's on their minds and what their goals are for the company. Maybe that's something that needs to happen on a regular basis in order to avoid the kind of train wrecks that happen.
Yeah. Lori?
Exactly. And I find that, Brian, we have started down that same path, and making sure that each of the sons have had an opportunity to voice their goals, their vision, their thoughts on the company privately with B to express, you know, what they feel that they may not be as so willing to openly discuss. And I think we've done that, and now I think we'd like to bring them together, as you suggested, on a more regular basis to air those concerns, to air their thoughts and their questions. And because there's always things that come up and you just don't know, you know, well, how is this going to impact this person or this part of the company or our personal lives, our families? How is this going to impact them as well? So I think you're absolutely correct. To have that kind of open dialogue on a regular basis is really probably where we as a company and we as a family need to go and to move forward on from here on.
I do want to say, and I appreciate that, but there are many people at the Conway that are available to help with this situation. And we work with that on a regular basis at the Conway. So, you know, one of the things about the Conway, I'm going to give a plug, is that we are very excited and thrilled that we are happy that we have helped with family businesses successfully transition to the next generation, rather than have to implode somehow. So we feel really good about that. That's what the Conway does, is that's why we're here, is to educate people. So thank you. So that was great. Jill?
Okay, so the only question I had was Amy had sent out the link to the Goldman Sachs program through the chat button below, and a couple of our people don't see the chat button. So if you did not get the link to the Goldman Sachs program that Lori referenced, please just let us know and we can send it to you. But otherwise, thank you, panelists, very much. We always try to end on time, and we are. Brian, I know you have an important meeting to get to. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Brian. We appreciate your candor.
Thank you.
As always. B, thank you very much for facilitating. Everybody stay well, wash your hands. If you need anything that we can help you with, yes, if there's anything we can help you with at the center, please reach out to me. Otherwise, we will see you at our next ED program, I believe on April 19th, maybe. Don't hold me to that, but you'll get the link. So thank you all very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.